Today, we're diving into a really mind-bending connection, something that links abstract math, ancient myths, and even psychoanalysis. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds completely impossible, right? But trust me, stick with me on this one. It's going to be worth it.
So let's jump right in. The central question here is, well, it's a big one. What could possibly be the invisible thread linking a logical paradox that almost broke mathematics, the universal pattern behind all our greatest hero stories, and the work of the very first psychoanalyst to translate Freud's most foundational ideas? How do those three things even belong in the same sentence? So you've got Russell's paradox over here. It's this tangled knot of pure logic. And then over here, you have the hero's journey, the blueprint for pretty much every story, from ancient myths all the way to today's blockbuster movies. They seem like they're from different planets, right? But what if I told you they might actually be reflections of the exact same deep, underlying structure?
All right, first up, the logic of nothing. To kick things off, we're going to have to go back in time, right to the turn of the 20th century, because that's when a paradox popped up that really shook the entire world of mathematics to its core.
So what we're talking about is Russell's paradox, which was discovered back in 1901. Now, it's famously a bit of a brain twister, so let's use a classic analogy to get our heads around it. Imagine a village, and in this village, there's only one barber, and the rule is simple. The barber shaves all men who do not shave themselves. So, who shaves the barber? Think about it. If he shaves himself, he breaks the rule, because he's only supposed to shave men who don't shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then he fits the criteria and he has to shave himself. It's a total trap, you can't get out of it, and it revealed this huge, deep flaw in the logic of set theory. Okay, so let's apply that same logic to the world of math. Here's the core problem. You have the set of all sets that do not contain themselves. Now the big question is, does that set contain itself? Yeah, I know, take a second with that one. It's a mouthful. But look, if the answer is yes, it does contain itself, then by its own definition, it shouldn't. And if the answer is no, it doesn't contain itself, well then it fits the description, so it should be in there. It's a contradiction no matter how you slice it, a perfect, inescapable logical loop that early set theory just could not solve. And believe it or not, this isn't just some abstract philosophical puzzle. It has very real consequences, especially in the world of computer logic. See, when you try to program something with this kind of self-referential rule, the computer doesn't just give you an error message and shut down. No. It gets trapped. It creates an infinite loop, just chasing its own tail forever, trying to answer a question that simply has no answer. So if you've got this dangerous, paradoxical void, what do you do with it? How do you handle it? Well, the author of the source material for this explainer came up with a pretty clever solution, a unique symbol. It's meant to represent a kind of safe version of this nothingness. And this is where things get really interesting, because this is our first symbolic bridge. The symbol itself, 0, 0, technically just represents the empty set in math. The void, the nothing that you can actually build all numbers from. But just look at it. Visually, it looks a lot like the triple moon, which is this ancient symbol for, you guessed it, the void, creation, and renewal. The parentheses are like these two guards, standing on either side, containing that chaotic, paradoxical emptiness and turning it into something safe, something creative. Okay, part 2. The hero in the womb. Let's shift gears completely. We're leaving the clean, abstract world of logic and jumping headfirst into the messy, epic realm of myths and stories. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard of the monomyth, right? It's also called the hero's journey. This is that universal story template that Joseph Campbell famously identified in myths from literally every corner of the globe. You know the drill. A hero leaves their ordinary world, they go through a bunch of trials in some kind of magical realm, and they eventually come back home completely transformed. It's an incredibly powerful and universal pattern. But that's the real question, isn't it? Why is it so universal? Okay, get ready, because this is the core, explosive idea we're exploring today. The theory goes like this. The hero's journey isn't just a convenient template for telling a good story. No, it's something much deeper. It's a symbolic retelling of the human intrauterine experience. It's a coded memory of our 9 months in the womb, our very first journey, literally. Right, Section 3, Brill's symbolic lens. Now, I know what you're thinking. That is a massive leap, isn't it? From a biological process to our most epic myths. So, how on earth do you connect those two dots? Well, to build that bridge, we're going to need a special kind of tool, a symbolic lens, if you will. And that lens comes to us from a man named Abraham Brill. Now, Brill was a true pioneer. He's the person who really brought psychoanalysis to America, by translating Sigmund Freud's most important works, like The Interpretation of Dreams, and his huge insight, the one that matters for us, was that folklore, fairy tales, and myths all function in the exact same way our dreams do. They are coded expressions of our deepest, most unconscious wishes and conflict.
Brill himself said it perfectly. He called myths and fairy tales oral outlets for our unconscious wishes, just like dreams. Think about that. It means these stories are basically how we, as a whole culture, dream out loud. They're a way to give voice to those really primal hopes and fears that we don't even have the words for. And that right there, that's the key that's going to unlock this whole thing. Okay, section 4, myth meets biology. This is it. This is where we put all the pieces together. Using Brill's idea of myths as dreams, as our symbolic lens, we can actually start to map the stages of the hero's journey directly onto the biological drama that plays out before we're even born.
Just take a look at how this breaks down. The parallels are pretty striking, right? So you've got the hero's departure from their normal life. The theory says this mirrors the moment of adoption by the endometrium. It's a symbol of our unconscious wish for that perfect, eternal symbiosis. Then comes the initiation, the hero's trials, getting swallowed by the belly of the whale. This lines up with implantation and the growth of the chorionic villi, a dangerous trial, where everything depends on that connection. And finally, the hero's return, coming back as a new, autonomous person. This symbolizes the bifurcation of the primal cell, a kind of fantasy of rebirth where that total dependence is finally overcome.
But here's the really crucial part. According to this theory, these myths aren't just recording our biology like some kind of history book. They're actually psychological tools. They're a form of wish fulfillment. They exist to help us cope with and maybe even suppress that deep existential dread that comes from our first experience, a state of total dependence and the trauma of eventually being separated from it.
All right, our final section, the story inside us. So after all that, what's the big takeaway? Let's zoom out for a second and really think about what this incredible connection of ideas means.
First off, this gives us a totally new lens to look at culture through. Suddenly, stories aren't just entertainment anymore. They're these deeply encoded dramas about our own biology and psychology. It also shows us the incredible power of symbolism, how a purely abstract mathematical concept like zero can actually mirror the same deep psychological structure we see in a myth, this idea of a protected void that allows for creation. And maybe most importantly, it suggests that our oldest, most powerful stories are really our attempts to process our earliest, most profound experiences, the ones that happened before we even had words.
And that really leaves us with one last huge question to chew on. If our oldest and most enduring myths are actually a kind of collective memory of the womb, then what other profound truths about who we are, about our biology, about our own minds, might be hiding in plain sight, encoded in all the other stories we tell ourselves every single day?